Zambia Blog Talk Radio.
Do you want to promote your business on Zambia Blog Talk Radio? Yes, that's right. Live on Zambia Blog Talk Radio. To book your spot, just make a donation by picking from the following categories. To get started, just call or WhatsApp the number on the screen and you'll be good to go. Live on Zambia Blog Talk Radio.
Zambia Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Every year, what we have done on this show during October, being the Independence Month for the Republic of Zambia, we have featured guests, particularly of politically inclined, political veterans, people that were part of the independence struggle, and they've shared with us some experience from a historical point of view of things that happened and what they experienced to get to the nation to where it is, where we got independence. Welcome to Zambia Blog Talk Radio. It is Saturday, 22nd October. In 2 days, Zambia will be celebrating its 58th independence celebration. So what we decided to do this time is to invite what I'm considering a citizen who has been through all the 58 years, experienced the 7 presidents that we've had, and have a conversation about things from a citizen's point of view, so that we sort of take responsibility as citizens to see where our nation has been and where it is going. Our guest is not a stranger, if I may use that word, and we are so delighted to have with us Mrs. Florence Mumba, joining us from Lusaka, Zambia. She's an ordained minister, an entrepreneur, an educator. I'm told she's a student, a grandma. She's going to tell us how many grandchildren she has now. And we are so excited to have Mrs. Florence Mumba join us today from Lusaka, Zambia. Mrs. Mumba, it took 14 years for you to be here. Welcome.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here this afternoon.
Excellent. We're looking forward to a great discussion. Since you are coming here for the first time, let's begin with this question. Who is Florence Mumba? Where in Zambia were you born and raised?
Okay, I was born in Mufulira, Zambia. And my parents moved to Kitwe when I was under a year old, and I grew up in Kitwe. Got married in Kitwe, had all my children were born on the Copper Belt. My youngest was born in Kalulushi. Otherwise, all 4 older children were born in Kitwe. Okay. I am the wife of Dr. Nevis Mumba, as most of you are aware. I'm a mom, I'm a grandmother. I have 6 grandkids,
6.
3 boys, yes, 3 boys and 3 girls. I'm an entrepreneur, businesswoman. I run a school, I run a guest house. I do landscaping services, and I do home decor for whoever wants and needs a service and wants my, my services. And I'm a student, still learning, working towards a doctorate in waste management. So still working with that, seeing what, how best to do it. So working on those things.
Excellent, excellent. So a light moment here before I want to ask you a question about our late dad, but before I ask you on that, okay. How was that experience when your first grandchild was born? Were you there?
Wow, good question. Good question. Incidentally, Nathan, I am not the oldest. I am the 5th child down the line. So I got married first. I got married at the tender age of 21. So it was not the norm. Wow. None of my older siblings were married. I was this young girl who said, okay, I accept this guy's proposal, and I jumped. And my father was very reserved, warm, but he didn't really express too much. But what happened was when our oldest son, Shumuel Sekwila Mumba, was born, my dad literally came to the hospital When he heard that I
Wow.
had the baby boy, he walked into the male, the ward, and it's all female. And ideally, only husbands are allowed. But my father came in. He wanted to see his grandbaby, and he was attached to them all the way through. The whole time he
Wow.
lived, these kids spent almost every weekend with him when he was alive. So we had
Mm.
a wonderful, wonderful time while he was living.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Was he politically inclined? What type of conversations would you have about national issues with him?
With my dad,
Yes.
my dad was a member of, he was a trustee of the United National Independence Party. Used to
Mm-hmm.
host every time Dr. Kaunda came to Kitwe. Actually, he took a break in my parents' home. So my parents were very political. They were freedom fighters, and they used to host even the freedom struggle when the men then were fighting to gain independence in Mufulira. Actually, they used to
Mm.
look after them and host them, and so their home was like a pit, a place where they would stop, to refresh and move on. So my father was very, very much a nationalist
Mm-hmm.
and a believer in blackness, in being African, and that you had to be proud of being an African, and there was nothing wrong with you. He used to tell us that almost on a daily basis, and I used to wonder why. But when I look back, when we started school, our
Yes.
schools were full of white kids, and I think because we were now merging, so the country had become independent, and all these white schools on the Copper Belt were now allowing African children in. So he used
Mm.
to always tell us, be proud of who you are. He used to actually sit down his daughters and he would tell us, don't bleach your skin, which was very funny. And he would tell us, never ever love a man 100%, which was very funny. He said, always leave 25% to make good decisions.
Ah.
He said, if you fall in love with a man 100%, he'll make you do stupid things. So you have to always leave 25% to use, to make good, sound decisions. So he always talked to us as his daughters, particularly, that we needed to be proud. We ought then to be proud that we were daughters and that we were Black and that our skin color was perfect as it was and we didn't need to bleach it.
Mm. Mm. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, very, very interesting, man.
I just thought I would ask that question, and I'm glad you've shared the thoughts.
Because my dad has left a big mark in my life. Sometimes, Nathan, you don't realize how impactful your parents or your family are until they're gone.
Mm.
That's when you sort of reflect and begin to think about the impact. My father was very impactful in my life. A lot of my decision making, a lot of my demeanor is more like him rather than my mom. So I draw a lot of strength and inspiration from his life.
Mm. Okay. Let's get into our discussion. I just wanted people to get to know a little bit of Mrs. Mumba, her family, and where she's coming from. Your lives. When I say your lives, I mean you and your husband, Dr. Mumba.
Mm-hmm.
You already mentioned and told everybody that he's your husband. Have been characterized by major decisions.
Yeah.
You've run a successful ministry for years. Transitioned from that and stepped into, I'll use the word, active politics. Although, I mean, Dr. Mumba always commented on politics, even when
he did. Yes, he did.
Every day. Even the Zambia shall be saved thing, people really didn't, and it wasn't just a spiritual thing.
I agree.
It wasn't just a spiritual thing. And the point I'm trying to make here is that from our ministry transitioned into active politics, if I may say that, to serving as Republican vice president, to diplomatic mission. He served in Canada as ambassador or high commissioner, and eventually became president, which he still is, president of the movement for multi-party democracy. What a packed life and full of activity. And
I feel it and I live it, so I understand it's packed. Yes.
So I think it's appropriate to ask this question from the wife and to get an answer from a woman's point of view, because there's a way us men respond to things. So two-part question. What has been the greatest takeaway from this journey?
Well, it's been an amazing journey. I don't regret any decision that we made, because before we made any of those decisions, we consulted with each other.
Yes.
The vice presidency came as a surprise. I was living in Dallas then. And one day, and I was cleaning homes. And one day my husband called me, and I was in the home of a Christian family who are very, very, very strong supporters of this organization that sponsors children. The name is not coming to me. World Vision.
World Vision.
And, you know, we used to always talk. I'd sit and, you know, clean their house. And she'd sometimes just sit me down, Florence, what do you do? What is Zambia like? And she'd ask me all sorts of questions. She was Australian, married to an American. So I got a phone call then. And this is the way my husband greeted me. He said, I want to speak to the second lady. And I said, excuse me? He said, I want to speak to the second lady. So I talked to him briefly and I hang up the phone and I continued to clean this house. And this lady was very intuitive, very, very spiritual. And she said, Florence, who's that, who called you just now? I said, oh, that was my husband. He was just checking in on me. And what did he call about? And I said, oh, he was just telling me something. I tried to evade it. And she, for some reason, I think she sensed something. So I said, oh, he's been appointed vice president of my country. She said, you're lying. I said, no, I'm not. And she went and Googled that. And then she started calling her friends. She said, you won't believe who's cleaning my house. The second lady of Zambia is cleaning my So that was hilarious. Wow. So that was a huge shift for me. My children, I was living in the United States with the children then. We had left Zambia because there were threats on our lives when we were living in Kitwe. And Doka became more and more politically engaged and active, and he started to criticize certain things during the Chiluba regime. There was a threat on our lives, and we were told this from reliable sources within the system, and they recommended that we leave the country. Okay. So we had no choice but to sell up and to move to Dallas. Now, the reason we moved to Dallas is we had friends and a support system. And actually our first, the sponsors of our visas to come into the United States and to be there for 5 years were actually based in Dallas. So that's how we ended up in Dallas, in a beautiful neighborhood where our kids could go to school. We chose that neighborhood on purpose. The realtor really helped us. So that's where I was with all 5 children. I did not expect that I would spend 7 years in Dallas. It was supposed to be a very short stint where I come, just escape the danger and return. And I didn't come back to Zambia for another 6 to 7 years. That was very, very challenging. So for me, it was hard. My children loved the US, but I found it difficult because I wasn't meant to be there in my own view. I also left the school running, my school in Kitwe, which was doing very well then. Prior to my husband's political engagement, it was really doing well. The minute he became engaged politically, we became targets of, there was a break-in, and that same break-in that made us leave, we were told there'd be a break-in at the house, someone would attempt on our lives, and we were just told, you just need to get out. It's not going to work for you. So the attempt did happen, and they started off at my school. They tried to kill the guard. For some reason, the guard was just given wisdom by God. They tried the whole night to harass him, and the plan just didn't work. So after that, Doc was very concerned. So that's how we left and came to Dallas. So that was the baptism into politics. Okay. And in 2001, Doc attempted and lost. And then I just said, well, it's not going to work, because if we can't be free and you are engaged politically, but we're in a hostile environment, we're actually punishing the kids. So that's how eventually we agreed that I would be in Dallas, even though we thought it would be for a short time. We ended up staying for a very, very long time. And I must say, Nathan, that I must say, when God tells you something and he gives you an instruction, we assume that it's going to be quick, but it has taken a very long time. However, the different stations that we have served in, so Doc became vice president. He didn't stay very long in that position. He was fired. He went back to Dallas, to the same Dallas that we had, sort of set as a post, an outpost. And then he came back and he became, for a while, he was just in Zambia. I was in Dallas. Then he was appointed High Commissioner, and we all left. We had all come back to Zambia because our visa has to live and work in the States had expired. So we had to go back. We all came back, and then we all left and went to Canada. And Canada for the children was very, very, was a good place for them. The school system, excellent. They were almost all at university level. When we left Dallas, they were all like either finishing or almost finishing. So that uprooting was very difficult for us.
Okay.
But by God's grace and the graciousness of the late President Rupiah Banda, may his soul rest in peace, we were appointed, to Canada, and that's how the children really got established. So for a long time now, it's been for everybody but me. You know what I mean? I went to Dallas because of the kids and their safety, went to Canada because Doc was appointed. So it's like I've always been sort of sitting in the background watching when is my turn. And everything that was mine was disturbed. So the business I was doing in Quito was disturbed. I had to leave that with other people. And I've now since come back and I'm working on putting it back together. So it's been something else. So I must say I've enjoyed it, even though it's been extremely difficult. And I must say the return from Canada back into Zambia, under President Sata, I must say has been the most challenging, was the most challenging because now it's passed. But it was also a good learning curve. I didn't know that I had the courage that I had within me to face some of the opposition we faced. And just that moral rage, to think, why are you being so mean to us? Just because we are not of your party. So a lot of things sort of awakened in me, a spirit of activism, to be more involved in our politics, because at the end of the day, if you're just going to be a target, you might as well get some skills and some understanding so that you can work this thing to your advantage rather than just being a victim. So I must say that regardless of all the ups and downs, I feel I'm a better person today. And I think I'm more developed emotionally in all ways. I think I'm more developed. So I'm happy. I can't really say I'm sad about it. Yeah.
Briefly, your stay at Government House, how was it?
Government House. Oh, my goodness. For those of us who are self-employed, moving from a self-employed position into a structured employed position was a big, big culture shock for me. Government House, you have security 24/7. There is nothing you do that is not that people, those who are around you, your security detail is not unaware of. Everything you do is under a microscope. Not only that, it's life at Government House was difficult because the vice presidency itself, the office, is a supportive role.
Yes.
But in some ways, you have to sort of stay behind, even though maybe you've got a skill set that would allow you to do more. You kind of always have to wait in the wings so that you don't offend, so that you don't step on people's toes. That was not very easy for us, especially because you're coming from ministry. Ministry is outward expression. You don't really minister inward. You express. So learning to bite our tongues, waiting to be told to do things was not easy for us, but we managed. I had a very good mentor in Mrs. Mwanawasa, regardless of whatever happened with the presidents and with between ourselves. I do not ever regret the fact that she was warm, she was uplifting, she gave me positions that expanded me as a person, and she asked me to step in certain roles for her while she was gone. All that experience was just phenomenal. It was under that office that I got to eat with the late President Robert Mugabe, the late Sam Nujoma, sitting at a table with King Mswati of Swaziland. I remember being, when Doc was sent to Swaziland, and, I was entertained by the Queen Mother. So the job itself just exposes you in ways you cannot even imagine. And even the church did not afford me that. So I am totally thankful to God for the experience. It was an amazing one.
Excellent. Excellent. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Zambia at 58.
Wow.
A citizen's reflection. Okay.
Yeah.
We are talking to you as a citizen. And like I said in my introduction, you've lived, you had what's the word?
Same
You've
years.
experienced all the 7 presidents. You've seen
That's true.
people lose elections, move on.
Yes.
Some go do well and things like
Others
that.
die and disappear.
Yeah, you've
Yeah.
seen the economics ups and downs. Remember one
Yeah.
time Coca-Cola went away and we had the tip-top. And,
Interestingly, Nathan, you know that Tip Top was developed when my father was working at the Coca-Cola company.
oh,
He
really?
and his colleague, yes, it's my dad and my dad and the late Mr. Eddie Sakuringa, who actually pioneered Tip Top.
Wow. Okay.
And how they just struggled to balance that drink. Do you remember it used to ferment?
Yes,
When
yes.
So the difficulties they had balancing that drink and eventually getting it, out onto the market, it was a real challenge.
Wow, so it took a bit of time behind the scenes before they put it
Oh,
out.
it did. And I don't even know if you remember that they also made a concentrate juice called Kobo, this fantastic orange juice, because the Coca-Cola company, because Dr. Kaunda's policy was now to use local
Yes.
products. Remember, they were trying to wean us off Coca-Cola.
Uh-huh.
So through the Coca-Cola company making Tip Top, they engaged local farmers who started to, grow fruit so that they could, sell them to the Coca-Cola company.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question I wanted to ask after raising those issues is, what would you say have been the top 4 most frustrating issues for you in the 58
The top
years?
4.
Mm.
Okay. I think the issues that bother me a lot when I look at the old Zambia that we grew up in, first, undoubtedly, the population has really grown. It has exploded. And I'll use the word explode because when I look in the 53 years from what our population was to what we have now, it's really exponential growth. I feel like we have never caught on to the fact that populations grow. So there's very little planning for all these people, whether it's in the education sector, whether it's medical, housing, roads, infrastructure. All of that is lagging behind. We are still depending primarily on what colonialists left, as in the structure of the city. Yeah. Zambians, on the other hand, have, after President Chiluba, allowed us to own our own property. It is amazing how well Zambians build and how stylish they are. I mean, you can look at new houses now. There are very few old houses that even look as good as the new ones. So you can see that there's great potential there. So some of the frustration I feel is I feel that we don't plan well as a country. And we don't have a projected plan to say, okay, after 5 years, we do have national development plans, but they tend to sit with the government. Whereas the people don't seem to have a general plan to say, okay, 5 years from now, we can be here. 10 years from now, we can be here. It seems to be individualized. Whereas in other nations, like where we lived in the US, you could tell that the government was driving a certain policy. And if you join certain things or open certain businesses, government would support it and the economy would grow. I just feel that we're still doing things haphazardly and individually rather than rallying the entire nation to a nation building exercise. So the road network frustrates me, education frustrates me, public services really, really grinds my gears. I'm just the filth in the city of Lusaka, the lack of just ability to clean up after ourselves. It's actually shocking. It's shocking. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. That I now, since you mentioned all the frustrations, you mentioned education as being one of them, and you are also an educator. You run a school, like you mentioned. Most people may not know that.
Yeah.
What major changes have you observed in the education sector?
Okay.
Under which you experienced? You and I came through a different education system.
Yes.
And what is pertaining currently? Because what happened is at some point it was changed from the form 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to grade 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever. Were the education reforms necessary? Was it a disaster? What has been?
Nathan, I am not a teacher by profession, but I have children. So my interest in education came from the fact that I wanted my children to experience what I had. And like you said, our government schools were so good that hardly anyone thought of a private school. Like, why would you go and pay extra money for a school when our schools were excellent? Yeah. I remember my first Zambian teacher was at grade 5. My first, all the way through grade 1 to grade 4, they were British. All of them were British. Grade 5, I had my first African teacher for a year. And then I went back to, I think, a Sri Lankan, then there was a Zambian, then there was a lady from Russia. And so we had a very diverse upbringing and tolerant, actually, tolerant. Even our schools were packed with children from all over the world, and even children of freedom fighters. So Zimbabweans, South Africans, you know, English-speaking children, children from England, you know, contract workers, particularly on the mines, a lot of British workers. So we went to school with just children from all over the world. So it felt normal to be in this environment. And then with the reforms, with the one-party state declaration and the privatization, I mean, the nationalization of the mines on the copper belt, we started to see a decline. All right, so there was a white flight. The Europeans left because obviously now the mines belong to the government. The revenue now was answering national issues, whereas before the revenue was particularly in the you know, it was working for the copper belt. That's why if you grew up on the copper belt, you had access to good schools, good sporting facilities, good hospitals, good specialized doctors. I remember when we fell ill, whether we needed a dentist or you needed an operation, the services were readily available. Yes. Now I was a child of a non-miner, but still you could access certain things through certain avenues. So that's how we grew up. We grew up with streets that were paved. They were not amazing roads, but the potholes were fewer at that time. So, and we had service delivery, people collected our trash, people were not throwing trash at, you know, on street corners. So that's how we came up. And so I wanted my children to have that. So as the policies of the government changed and the nationalization came into play, and Zambianization particularly meant that, you know, in any position where a Zambian was qualified, the Zambian government was not going to allow a foreigner to occupy that position. Yes. Unfortunately, in my own view, that, you know, Zambianization also came with a feeling of entitlement, where someone felt, I'm Zambian, I don't have to deliver. This is just my job. And we felt it. My first job after completing journalism training at Mindolo Community Foundation was at the City Council as a deputy speechwriter for the governor. And it was amazing how many people left the office, didn't work. They would just wait to get a paycheck. So there was a very strong socialist sort of mentality. You went to work to just get a paycheck. It wasn't about deliverables. It wasn't about you excelling in your workplace. You were a Zambian, you were entitled to a salary, whether you delivered or not. So I think that has hurt us a lot. You know, this thing of wanting to own things without the demand on our skill set and without excellence. It has really hurt us. So I remember in the 70s, around about the same time that, you know, the declaration of Zambia as a one-party state and, you know, the socialism and everything, our school, which was Valley View School in Riverside, which was a pretty little small school, had one stream of every class, we started to have these children come in the afternoon. So, you know, we were just a nice private school, not a private government school, but a nice school. Yes. And suddenly we started to have these children coming in the afternoon.
Yes, I remember when they introduced afternoon session classes.
So suddenly the school became like there was another school operating when you left.
Yes.
And we slowly started to see the standards beginning to drop. It was very gradual because Dr. Kaunda tried, in the sense that he wanted to share this national cake. He wanted to be equitable. Unfortunately, my belief system is you cannot be equitable if some of you are non-taxpayers. You can only speak of equity if you're all contributing to the tax, you know, to the pie. But if you are maybe only 30% of you are contributing, you can't really have 70% be freeloaders and expect success in anything. So we saw that change. And then I think it was just a strain. This free education was a strain on government coffers because it was not just primary, it was not just secondary, it was also tertiary. Whether it was university, I remember going to Zambia Institute of Technology as a secretarial student. We used to get allowances, by Nathan. Our linens, our bed linens were from the government. And we had a matron who used to come and check if we were pregnant or not.
Really?
Yes, because if you got pregnant, then you had to be kicked out of school. So she used to come around and sort of feel our stomachs every Friday, which was weird. And then we used to get allowances and our meals were free. So when you think of that cost per head, then we also went to national service. National service where we were given allowances. We were fed for free. Now think about that over a period of time. And all these people are not most of them are not taxpayers. So the government borrowed heavily, and we all know what happened in the 80s. We all know that that's what gave rise to multi-party democracy when this government started to fail and struggled to keep up. And this affected everything: medical care, college, education, roads, everything started to break down. So we saw that affect even our quality of education. So it's been really sad. But education, like you asked me earlier, my dream when President Chiluba came into power, he was the one who allowed private schools to start again. He thought government needed help. The schools were crowded, so he passed a law. So they allowed private schools to come into play. So that's why you see this plethora of private schools. It's because there was a deliberate policy to sort of decongest the schools and have private schools assist government. So with that, I remember when I first started my school in 1993, there were no textbooks that written for Zambians. Okay. There was no national curriculum at that time. I remember going to look for books, and Mulenga and Jelita were the only books that were there, like to teach first grade children how to construct sentences and to read. There were just huge gaps. So if you remember, the MMD partnered with the British government, I remember, and they started to write, a syllabus now for Zambia. So we started as the school progressed, we got the first books through Macmillan Zambia. They started to, restructure the whole education program. And it was from grade 1 to grade 9 as basic, if you remember. Then secondary was, was 10, 11, 12. So if you remember our form system, we were being examined by the Cambridge University. That's why we had the form system. And then when Examinations Council of Zambia was formed and we started to administer our own exams, first it was a partnership where there was a transition. Yes. And now we have our own syllabus, we have our own examiners, and we have our own system, which is actually improving. I must say it had a difficult start, and unfortunately, with every new government, there is some tweaking that goes on. So to me, it becomes difficult because what was, sort of applied 10 years ago has changed. So it's like it's constantly changing, but I wouldn't really say our curriculum is better because I actually resat some of my O levels. Okay. And I actually said, you know what, the way these exams are marked in our time at Cambridge, oh my goodness, it was tough.
Yes,
you had very few, like now you have division ones like no one's business. Not in our time. Not in our time.
Oh my goodness me.
Yeah.
Before we continue this conversation on education, and we take a break, let me just make an announcement here that at the end of the show, like 10 minutes before, we have a new thing that we've introduced. We're going to test this. We're going to show a phone number on the screen. And those of you watching, if you'd like to ask Mrs. Mumba a question, you're going to get that opportunity. I'm only going to take about 2 or 3 questions just to test the system. We're doing this for the first time. Now, let's take a commercial break and we'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to promote your business on Zambia Broad Talk Radio? Yes, that's right. Live on Zambia Broad Talk Radio. To book your spot, just make a donation by picking from the following categories. To get started, just call or WhatsApp the number on the screen and you'll be good to go. Live on Zambia Broad Talk Radio every Saturday for 1 full month. And it will stay on the recorded shows.
Welcome back. We're speaking to Mrs. Florence Mumba, and our discussion is a citizen's reflection, Zambia at 58. If you'd like to advertise on the show, the number is scrolling at the bottom. You can call those numbers and we shall be able to facilitate your commercial on our show. Mrs. Mumba, education is a very important aspect of a nation's development. To what extent has our education system influenced or affected our development? Because there's some observations that I make and I noticed that we have a lot of challenges.
Yeah, we do. We do. For instance, let's look at even what's happened with UPND coming into power and introducing free education.
Yes.
What has happened with that is the classes that were already full at about 80, 90 children per class and have now reached 120, 140 children per class. I'm still taking some classes. So I have a teacher who teaches me, and she incidentally started her career as a student, as a pupil teacher at my school many years ago. She's now a deputy head at a school, so we talk a lot, and so we exchange notes because I'm still running the same school where she started many years ago, and she's now in the public service. And she was talking about the fact that it's just impossible to teach 120 children, 140 children per class. A lot of these children are sitting on the floor. You have, groups coming in at different times. So at the end of the day, that teacher, no matter how excellent they are, cannot give individual attention to those children. So you can imagine how many children are falling through the cracks. What I've noticed with education is, even for someone like me who runs a private school, the parent involvement is actually not stellar in this country. There are very few parents who literally engage in their children's education. It feels most of the time like we're a babysitting service. Like parents need to go to work, so they leave their children somewhere where they feel they'll be safe and they're getting some kind of education, and then they pick them up at the end of the day, and that's it. When you have open day, and the whole time I've been running my school, I think the percentage would be 5%, 10 the max, of parents who literally knew what they wanted their children to become. These children would just be brought to school, and if they passed, the parents were happy. He came 6th, he came 7th, and that's it. I didn't see an education that was, sort of geared towards producing a certain kind of population. Now, you live in the West, Nathan, and you know that particularly the United States is very deliberate about what they want to achieve. So you need a certain skill set to participate in certain sectors of the economy. I know that the US has been pushing, science, technology, engineering, and math. It's been a very, very big push because their nations are becoming digital. Now, here, yes, there are children who are really gifted, and we are very gifted as African children because I think we're always starting off on the back foot. We're not as advantaged as our peers in the West. So when a child excels here, I want you to know that they are exceptionally brilliant. You can actually tell this child is exceptionally brilliant. And what you notice is as these children grow older and maybe get a scholarship to study elsewhere, they leave. They don't return because there's nothing that will catch them when they come back. So as our children desire to return, the levels of, the companies or the content of companies when they return is far inferior to what they're used to in the West. So there's no incentive There is no incentive. Now, it doesn't mean it can't be done, and it doesn't mean it's not possible. However, there has to be a plan where we're not just catering to the lowest of our society, but we're beginning to make plans for this nation to prosper, to be a middle and upper income class society, rather than always thinking, what will people eat? They need basic health care. It's too basic. And as a country, a lot of us are waiting to be inspired, because I became an entrepreneur by myself. There was no money to help me. It was my father who gave me my first loan. And ZRA had actually just started to operate, and they quizzed him like no one's business. They called me in. Where did you get this money to start the school? I said, 35,000 kwacha. My dad lent it to me. So my dad was called in. So it's like we don't have this environment that breeds prosperity. It kind of stifles and kills. And our education system is also like that. So once again, Nathan, we have these crowded classes. We have an education system that is not probably even well suited to the needs that we have. And I'll give you an example. I belong to a garden club, and we have some young ladies who've joined us recently, and the direction of the garden club changed because they started to ask pertinent questions. For instance, some of the ladies asked, Mrs. Mumba, what if I want to be involved in emerald mining? You know, you grew up on the copper belt. What do I need to do? So I said, okay, give me time to research and I'll come back to you. So we ended up going to visit a business here in Lusaka, well established. They mine, they manufacture, they export. So we spent an afternoon with the owners of the business, and they were explaining how they would love to see more Zambians participate in emerald mining. Now, it would be wonderful if the government went beyond maybe just giving us licenses, but actually giving you startup capital so that you can then pay back. You know what I mean? But you start to now decide, we're going to allow Zambians to own this sector. So those are deliberate moves. They're not happening by chance, but for some reason we think these things will just happen. They will not happen. The laws themselves, for instance, if I come to the United States today and I say I want to immigrate, as far as I know now, it will cost me $1 million US. I have to bring $1 million US as an investor to come into the States as a legal immigrant coming to settle. So we have Zambians, we have people pouring into our nation, Nathan, we are a corridor. People are heading to South Africa, people are heading everywhere. Zambia is like a transit point. There are people coming in from Somalia, coming in from Eritrea, coming in from the Sudan. And it's like there's no requirement. People can just come and start selling on a street corner. And you're wondering, how can a nation develop like that? You know, you allow people who are not citizens to come in and benefit from the little you have, but there's no system to tax them enough so that they pay back or say, thank you for allowing me this space, and this is what I will give you in return. So once again, I just feel that we're on a back foot with the vision for our country and how we want our country to progress and how we want it to grow and develop. We don't seem to have a plan. And if there is a plan, no one has let me know. I would love to know about it so that I can direct my energies. Seriously, instead of working in an isolated manner, I would like to be working as a nation to say, this is what you want to achieve. They might say, Mrs. Mumba, for the next 10 years, Zambia wants to have at least 2,000 more private schools with a capacity for 100,000 children. You know what I mean? Statistics. So that we can literally say, okay, if I invest in education, the next 10 years, I'll get a return. Because that's what really drives a country. We can't be guessing our way into investment.
No, we can't.
No, we can't.
Let's ask this question. To what extent are we as citizens responsible for how our leaders have turned out to be? Did we create the dictators and corrupt leaders who have plundered the nation?
You know, as I was reading that, I said to myself, oh, wow, what a potent question. No, I couldn't really place the full responsibility of the quality of our leaders on Zambians, because I'll tell you why. The citizen in Zambia is the most disenfranchised player in the political scene. As a citizen, and I'll give you an example, when, for instance, you start to voice your concerns about maybe accountability in government, missing funds, the next thing that's going to happen to you is the police will suddenly land on your door. They'll start to harass you. They'll think of something to accuse you of. The next you know, like Doc and I have been through these things, you're at Woodlands Police Station, locked up with trumped up charges. I remember when the police came, the last big one, they came to the house Saturday morning. The guard opened the gate by mistake and they parked by the middle of the gate and they wouldn't let us close the gate, and they moved in special unit police, and they said that they had come to pick up Doc because he had stolen guns. Okay. Now, anybody who knows Doc knows that the last thing Doc would have is stolen guns. It's just the nature of the man. The nature of the man. So that kind of harassment, that level of harassment comes when you engage politically. Now, imagine that happening to prominent people like Doc. Do you think that incentivizes another citizen to participate? No.
Okay.
So people are intimidated.
So the atmosphere of intimidation,
very strong.
Police brutality, if we may say that, it creates a situation of
if a politician, Nathan, can call a police officer to come and just pick you up because you criticized him, you're taken to the police station, you're standing there waiting to be charged. They are waiting to be told what. I remember the police calling, what are we supposed to charge Dr. Mumba with?
And you are listening to that phone conversation.
Yes, we haven't decided, wait, we'll let you know.
So meanwhile, before they decide, you sit there.
You're sitting. And now it's like the drama is amazing. So now the cadres are there, there's noise, the cameras are there, and the government or the police and the agents have already called the camera. So ZNBC is there, Diamond TV is there. So it's just this circus. And I used to wonder, thinking, if we took this energy and really used it to change this nation, we would do miracles. But we are just playing with power, messing around with power, using it to, to punish others who oppose us. So I think the atmosphere does not encourage a positive engagement with our elected leaders, with the population engaging with elected leaders in a pragmatic way to say, sir, I think in our ward or in our constituency, if we concentrated on this road, it would open up the economy of our constituency and we could actually help with the youths who are unemployed. There are so many of us like that, Nathan, but how do we engage? The avenues are not clear. And anytime you try to engage in a non-partisan way, people look at you, they view you with suspicion. If I raise issues, for instance, about the city, the next thing will be Mrs. Mumba wants to stand as mayor. That's the next thing that will come out of someone's mouth. It will not even be like I'm concerned about the lack of services. It's more.
Why do we think like that? Why do we think like that?
I think it's a new muscle. To be honest, Zambia is a young nation. It's a young nation. We have not developed the muscle first to be criticized. So we don't have a muscle for constructive criticism. Anyone who criticizes us is then a political opponent. When some of us are just concerned about how clean our city is, we're not interested in the political jobs. We just want the council to do its work. That's all. And we would like to would love to keep talking about it until it's done. But I'm not interested in the honorable mayor's job. I just want the city to tick. So we are young at politics. We are a new nation. So we will stumble. We'll struggle, but we do need more of a fight that is trying to make these institutions strong and the voices of the citizens stronger so that we can develop quickly. The beauty of being a young country is you do not have to take 200, 300, 400 years to evolve. You can evolve quicker because you've got big brother nations that have already done this. So you can actually skip some of the steps and get there quicker.
That's true. Does the Zambian constitution, Mrs. Mumba, adequately protect and empower its citizens?
Okay.
How enlightened are we about
very
our
good
rights?
question. We were not before, but as I started to retake my O levels, there is a course called civic education that has been introduced. It was civics in our time, but now remember civics I think we used to stop at Form 3, if I'm not mistaken. But now it's required that if you're going to work in a government office or institution, you must have taken civic education. And civic education is basically just teaching the Constitution at the level of grade 12, so that by the time just the basic qualification of a grade 12 certificate, so that if someone wants to be a councillor or an MP, at least they have that. So civic education is now required. However,
that's brilliant.
Yeah. However, those who graduated prior or before this was introduced don't have that under their belt. And so what we have is people reacting to news stories, or this one has been picked up and whatever. So we are reacting, but do we really know what we can do? So I have found, for instance, as an employer, I have to be very, very conversant with the labor law because my workers have rights and I have rights. So when we fall out or I have to fire somebody, I have to do it within the law, because as a sitting business, a tax-paying sitting business, you are an easy target. All right. You are easy to find. ZRA can find you, NAPSA can find you, Zambia police can find you, because you're sitting right there. So I've had to school myself to understand what the law requires of me and to make sure I am compliant, so that I can protect my business and also protect the employment of those people who are hired by myself. So the general population, I would say, is not as schooled and as informed. That's why I suppose maybe the poor are the ones who tend to go to rallies to be told what is going on. As a voter, as a Zambian voter, I don't need to attend a rally to vote for you. I will vote for you because I've seen results and because I somehow feel you're going to perform. And if you don't, no matter how much chibuku you give me, I will not vote for you because I am informed. But unfortunately, the people at the bottom who have migrated into the city, so they're living in poor housing, they cannot afford education for their children. Those are the ones that need real education. And we can do that through just public education, where we sensitize our people and we make sure that whether it's through billboards, through counselors, just engaging with their community, so that they know their basic rights, so that they can engage with information as an informed citizenship.
That's very important. Let's look at some comment. Okay, this is that's the number. Those of you who would like to ask Mrs. Mumba a question, those are the numbers to call. For those in Zambia, that's a WhatsApp number. And those in Europe, USA, Canada, that's the number. Let's see some comments from those that are watching us and just interact with them and see what the people think about what we have discussed and we have said so far. Mwango Chinene says, Mwashibuke Nivane. Thank you, Mwango. Okay. Hello, Auntie Florence. That's from Zindi. Hey, amazing lady. Zindi, you are special. Very special, Zindi. All right. Watching from Florida, Matilda. Thank you for your support.
Yeah.
That's good. Alice, hey, Alice. She blasted this thing all over social media. Good morning, Alice. Yes. Very powerful. Yes, we agree. Mrs. Mumba is very powerful. Probably that's why she stayed behind the scenes for a long time, because she was going to run over everybody.
That's hilarious.
Patricia, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. We appreciate you watching. And I'm watching as well.
Yeah.
Say hi to Big Sis. Yeah, it's good when family supports you.
So nice to see that you're there.
It's so nice to see family supporting and everybody. All right, Matilda again. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Those of you who would like to ask Mrs. Mumba what a question, that is the number to call over there. And whenever a call comes through, we shall be notified that somebody's calling. One thing I was wondering, whilst we're waiting for a call, Mrs. Mumba, to come in, there is this thing between the Zambian church, Zambian Christians, and what is going on in the nation. Somehow you tend to see similarities to say all these 1 million prophets who have come up.
You know?
Are tending to what's the word?
It's like a spirit of confusion. There's a spirit of confusion.
There's a spirit of confusion, and you tend to see it in the nation as well. Is it the same thing translating on the political arena? What do you think about that?
Well, the scriptures say people perish for a lack of knowledge. So at the end of the day, you are only as powerful, and you can only react within the knowledge you have. If you don't have knowledge, I'll give an example. Ridiculous things, you see it all the time. If you go to a Komboni, right? You're going to see maybe a brazier in the middle of the yard and young children playing around the hot pot. And you would think that when I remember in grade 6, 7, the teachers would be teaching about safety in the home. They'll talk, and it's still going on. What I realize is that every human being who comes to the earth really comes blank. Without education and information, they are blank. So wherever they don't have that information, there's nothing. There's just emptiness. So when you look at, say, the prophet, I'll call it the prophet industry. I will not call it ministry.
I like that. That's a good one.
It's speaking of people's insecurities, of people's fears, when it's particularly around election time. This country feels like it's charged. There are prophets everywhere. This we have experienced firsthand. People who traveled as far as Nigeria, prophets to come and prophesy, Dr. Mumba, you're the next president, whatnot. I mean, the circus is unbelievable. What is even more unbelievable is how people expect you to pay them for bringing you a word that you did not ask for. Oh, but this is what this industry is. And it's really, really ravaging the poor in our society because they are so worried. How are they going to live? My husband has run away. I'm left with 2 kids. So she goes to an overnight prayer meeting seeking God, please bring him home. What am I going to do? And the prophet says, I see a woman here who is struggling. You can, if you just give me an offering of, 1,000 kwacha. This is what is going on. So people are being preyed on. There's a lot of ignorance. One of the things I learned coming through this political thing. But Nathan, if you do not hear God for yourself and you don't have a relationship with God for yourself, trust me, you will be deceived. The Bible says in the end times, there will be such a spirit of deception that if it were possible, the elect would be deceived. So to me, that is speaking of a sophisticated system of deceit. So when you look at our country now, it is the trauma that people are experiencing that makes them easy prey for these men and, these men of God.
Sad.
Because I have seen people suffer. For me, because I'm a Bible school student, Doc, if you were sitting here, I would tell you, people would walk into my house and the minute they would walk out, I would say, that's rubbish. And Doc would say, I said, Doc, that's rubbish. And I'll tell you why it's rubbish. Because the scripture says A, B, C, D. So because I'm informed in certain areas, because I have the light of God's word in me, that darkness cannot be present in me. But if there is no light in me, I will think, oh, that must be God. I was praying and this man of God has come. That must be God.
Yeah. Let's take a call, Mrs. Mumba. We have Pastor Alan from Florida. Good morning, Alan. Go ahead.
This is Pastor Alan Mlenga in Tampa, Florida.
Yes, sir.
And it's a pleasure to speak with you. My question is really coming from the church point of view. What has been the contribution, in your opinion, for the church, the Zambian church, particularly the evangelicals, but generally the church, from independence, co-independence, independence, where we are today, and how did we arrive here today? What contributions church made to the politics of the nation, development in the nation? Where have we failed, or where have we excelled? And going forward, for people or ministers or people that are clergy that are outside of Zambia, what is the best way in which you can think, or which you think we can make a contribution to the advancement? Of course, for us, number one is the expansion of the kingdom of God, but also development and social issues in Zambia. How can we positively contribute? Because, and I say, how can we positively contribute? Because sometimes you hear so many negative things about the church, especially in today's climate. But how did we get here, and what do you think our contribution is? Is it positive? Are we on the right track as a church, or do we need to make adjustments?
Good question, Wahalan. Thank you. Mrs. Mumba.
Excellent question. So when we say church, I'm assuming you are meaning every kind of church, as in Catholics, Reformed Church, SDA. I'm thinking you're thinking of every, sort of denominational body. First, when you look at this country, the Zambia we know was, it was David Livingstone who came, did a missionary journey through this country, told the British government they needed to colonize Zambia because he felt certain things were going on. And so the first people who actually started to work and set up clinics and hospitals in this nation were actually church people. So whether we look at SDAs in Southern Province, whether we look at United Church of Zambia, Lubwa Mission, Chinsali, wherever we turn, you will see that it was the churches and their missionary societies that first started to put a system of governance in this country. And we still have the same power. However, we are speaking we are now in a politically charged era where it's difficult to sort of come in and say, okay, today I'm going to build a school. For instance, there are missionary organizations that build community schools, and then they hand them over to government. So maybe you can raise the money to build a school, but you can't pay teachers. So people will come in, build a school in maybe a low income area, and then give that school to the government of Zambia so that the government hires teachers and offers that educational facility to children who are not as privileged. Even our hospitals, when we look at the Baptist mission in Impongwe, we look at the Catholic missions, the hospitals, even in this nation, the specialist eye hospitals in Eastern Province, Catholic missions. So churches are known for making social changes and contributing in real money to make a difference in people's lives. Even in the United States, I remember in Texas, the Methodist Church offers fantastic healthcare services. And it's done in a way that it's not free, it's paid for, but the excellence and the integrity that is required to do these things, I think the church is well positioned to do these things even in our nation. Yesterday, Doc and I were at a function of a pastor friend of ours, and we sat at a table where we were with Excellency Mwamba, Dr. Malama, and I forget the other gentleman. We were all believers who have worked in government at some point or another. It was very interesting to see. And I was telling Doc, I said, look at these believers. We were sitting there talking about the Lord, excited about what God is doing. And Honorable Mwamba served under PF, Dr. Malama under PF, Doc and I under MMD, but we are believers. And what I find is that if we can remain united as believers, regardless of our affiliation, politically, it allows the testimony of Jesus to be in every government. Now, I may not agree with PF policies, but there are believers like me who worked with PF, and their influence within PF is for good if they are doing it right and they are walking right with their God, because we are called to be the salt where we are. God didn't say you must all gather in one place, but wherever we are supposed to bring godly counsel and influence, so that you should never, ever have to ask permission You as a man of God and as a pastor, you just have to ask God, where can I be useful? It can be orphanages. It can be bringing maybe services. I remember Doc was receiving donations through an organization in the States, and it was just medical stuff,
Equipment,
and you
yeah.
would just donate it to hospitals. So there are many, many ways in which we can be the salt of the earth. We can contribute to the well-being of our nation without necessarily having a political affiliation. We are just believers, and we want to bring positive influence and positive change. So I encourage you, pray about it, because one thing you will find is if you're away, you have to make sure that whatever you're doing, someone accounts for it, that it's
That's
not
right.
misused. You know, you can send money, you can send things, but you want to make sure it reaches the person that you sent it to, that it doesn't end up being sold or donated or given to someone else, but it reaches its target audience.
Excellent. Let's read the question from the comments and we shall conclude here. Our time is up. And okay, let's have that question. This is from Michael Luamba Pepala. He says, hello, please ask Mama Mumba how we can help our people, especially in rural areas, who are cheated by politicians in the name of being pro-poor. What will these politicians do when there are no more poor people? Do they ever think think of taking our people out of poverty, as it seems to them poverty is their marketplace? Wow.
True. It's true.
Very,
very, very good question. I think maybe your heart is probably bleeding from, and I'm sorry to mention this, but there is a point of reference here. This is, for instance, let's look at Wapula province. President Sata came in and he said he wanted a university in every province, right? We saw not too long ago when they were accounting for monies that was, you know, the Frederick Chiluba University and certain things where money was released and these universities do not exist. I actually, if you're up here in Lusaka and you go through Palavana, that university was also started, Palavana University, in the middle of nowhere. These buildings sprung up. It sort of stalled, you know, it didn't really finish off, and money, I think, obviously disappeared. I think what I must say, from having observed the last election, and during the last election, I was on the fence, to be honest. I didn't want PF to win, I'll be honest, just because of the gassing and just the culture of cadreism. We were under siege by, you know, the lowest level of society. It was really horrible to be a Zambian about just over a year ago. It was really traumatic. And I remember when they were counting the votes, and the night before they announced President Hakainde Hichilema winning, I didn't sleep. And I think a lot of Zambians didn't, because we didn't know what was going to happen. If PF retained power, then it meant certain things were going to continue. If a new government came in, there was new hope. Even though we didn't know how well they were going to do, we just wanted to make sure something shifted so that we could possibly do better. So the truth is, the power that Zambians exhibited at the ballot box is something we should not take for granted.
That's true.
The Zambian people removed a government that was wielding almost control, all power. You couldn't penetrate as a citizen. You couldn't speak up. You were going to be locked up. There were people gassing you. They were on the streets. You were scared. People could just take things from you. They could take phones. They could just decide you're going to go into this pass. It was horrible. But in a quiet way, Zambians, through the ballot, removed the previous regime. In that moment, my hope and pride in Zambians was renewed. We chose not to take up arms. We were pressed on every side, but we waited quietly. When I saw the turnout, I knew. I said we were all on the same page. The propaganda and the campaign songs told us President Lungu was not going to lose. But there was a feeling inside that surely not everyone must be unhappy, because the unhappiness we're feeling, we could feel it. It was palpable. We could feel it across the nation. And the Zambians showed forth and showed out. And now we have a new government in place. So we do have power. The people in the villages have power too. And that power currently is at the ballot box.
Excellent, excellent. Wow. Mrs. Mumba, what an amazing discussion. You know, that's what happens when somebody shows up after 14 years.
I've been here, but Nathan, trying to rebuild my life with all the changes that have gone in my life. I've had to rebuild it somewhere.
I know. Here's how. This is how we are going to end this discussion. Okay.
Yeah.
This is how we are going to end this discussion. A few weeks ago, I got a call from a friend. They were traveling to Lusaka and they wanted a place to stay. So I told them and I said, you know Mrs. Mumba, right? They said, yes. I told them, go to our Facebook page, scroll down, and you're going to find, let's just show the people what I wanted that person to see on your page.
Nestled in a quiet neighborhood of Ibex Hill, near the United States Embassy in Lusaka, is Tasha's Place. A fully serviced 4-bedroom and 4.5-bath house is rented out on a daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly basis as a whole house at very competitive rates. Discounts are given for longer stays of a week, a month, and more. Call 096-230-5557 for details. Terms and conditions apply.
Wow. When I saw that, I was like, I want to stay there.
You're welcome.
Tell us about Tasha's Place and what is...
Tasha's Place is the business I started. Dr. Mumba was given a piece of land as one of his benefits after serving as vice president. Very, very small piece of land. And I was just scared to take on the challenge to build. He didn't really care for it. So I sent a worker there. They cleared the land. And my daughter had a dream. Natasha, which is why it's called Tasha's Place. She had a dream and she said, Mama, I had a dream of you in a brand new house and you had a housewarming party. And I just wanted to share that dream with you. To me, that was God saying, Florence, go for it. So I started to build that property from the ground up until I finished it. God came through at every level. So it's now a guest house that can be booked as an entire house. So it's $250 currently per night, and it can house up to 8 people. So it's self-catering. You come in, you do your own cooking, and that's it. So anytime someone wants to check us out, we are on Airbnb, Lusaka, Tasha's Place. Currently, it's occupied up until the end of November, but after that, it opens up.
All right, excellent. Well, I just thought that we should share that. Everybody, that's the number.
Thank you. I appreciate the publicity.
Tasha's Place, there you go. Let's support each other.
Thank you.
And do. Mrs. Mumba, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. I mean,
I am thankful that you thought of me.
Special. I wish I could show all the comments on social media, but it's not just possible. Everybody's saying yes. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And I'm glad that, I mean, like you said, hear God for yourself. Like I said, what we have done over the 14 years of this show is brought in, which has been good. Our veteran politicians, they've shared the history, what they went through, the struggle of independence and everything else. But this time I just got an impression on my heart to say, let's talk to a citizen, you know, who's going to give us a citizen's view of where our country is. What would be your final word to everybody who calls himself or herself Zambian?
Okay. One thing I've always believed in is to be extremely positive, and there is nothing that we can fail to do if we set our mind to doing it. Sometimes we over politicize our problems, they're not really political. It's really knowing how we're going to tackle them and how we're going to engage until we bring about the desired result. I really believe in us as a people. I know that we are skilled. When I see the things young Zambians are achieving now, I never even saw it in my lifetime. So within the Zambians, there is a hope, there's a desire. They really want to see excellence exhibited in every area of our lives. So all I can say is, let's rise up. Let us rebuild this country. It can be better than this. It will require some of us engaging rather than just being commentators. You know, we can talk all we like, but we need boots on the ground. So at some point, we're going to have to do something to engage so that our nation improves and we become a beacon of light and hope as we know we can be.
Excellent, excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, that was our show for today. Our
Thank you so
guest
much.
was Mrs. Florence Mumba, and she has just given us what she had to give. Next week, we shall allow more time for phone calls. We are having a guest from State House, one of President HH's advisors. I won't say his name until it is confirmed and it is cleared. He has to get clearance. You know, Mrs. Mumba, how these things work here. Otherwise, they've given us an affirmative. Yes, he's going to do it, but we are working on certain things so that he confirms. Thank you, Mrs. Mumba, and everybody else.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. Thank you. Blessings.
All right. Blessings.
Take care.
Do you want to promote your business on Zambia Broad Talk Radio? Yes, that's right. Live on Zambia Broad Talk Radio. To book your spot, just make a donation by picking from the following categories. To get started, just call or WhatsApp the number on the screen and you'll be good to go. Live on Zambia Broad Talk Radio every Saturday for 1 full month. And it will stay on the recorded shows.
Zambia Blog Talk Radio.